Welcome to Learning Revolution Conference. I hope you are enjoying the conference, and this next session is on rethinking and apologize for the typo lesson design with AppFlow. My name is Kelly Mendoza. I manage professional development at Common Sense Media, and I'm excited about our session today. So feel free to use the chat function to chat with other participants. And I will try to keep an eye on the chat box if you have any questions. You can always raise your hand too, and I'll try to get to any questions. So let's get started. Just want to give a shout out to sponsors for this conference. So thank you, Blackboard, very much for your services and support. It looks like we have a couple people here now, but I'm still interested in where you're from. So I'm going to give you whiteboard permissions, and what you'll see is a map, and you can use the, on the left hand you'll see a star or a pencil, and you can use the star to just indicate where you're from. I'm in San Francisco, California. But feel free to use that to tell us a little bit about where you are in the world. And so what you'll do is take the little star and just see where you are in the map. Or you could just put it in the chat box. That's fun too. I'll tell you a little bit about Common Sense Media in a minute, okay, great. I just saw a happy face on India. Thank you for joining. And let's keep moving here. All right, so we are talking about rethinking your lesson design with a new concept called AppFlow. That a lot of people are talking about and using as a way to weave in technology into their curriculum and into their teaching. And I'm going to show you a free tool by Common Sense Media that will help you create app flows and do a broad array of skills that are relevant to educators in a digital age. So let's get started. So I'll first start by introducing who Common Sense Media is, if you're not familiar with us. And I'll talk about Graphite, which is a platform that helps you discover, use, and share great apps, websites, and games for learning. I will transition into app flows and how Graphite, how you can create app flows on Graphite and what it is and how it connects with lesson design. And if I have time, I will talk about connections with the SAMR framework by Ruben Puentedura, but hopefully I'll have time for that because it's a really good connection with app flows. So Common Sense Media, we are a nonprofit organization. We're based in San Francisco. We have offices all around the U.S., and we're dedicated to improving the lives of kids and families by providing trustworthy information, education, and independent voice that they need and to thrive in a world of media and technology. So one of the things we do is rate, and particularly it was one of the first things we did is rate children's media for parents. So movies, TV shows, music, books, and now we rate apps and websites and games from a parent's perspective to help parents be informed about the media that they use with their kids and make great decisions because there's a lot of great stuff out there. We also do advocacy work on behalf of children and media in Washington and beyond. So for instance, student privacy is a big focus this year for us, and that means helping schools keep students' information private from third parties that are collecting their data. And we do education, so that's what I'll be focused on today. But we provide schools K-12 focus complementary programs to help students harness the power of technology for learning and for life. And our education programs work together in the following ways. And what I'll be focused on today is you'll see, let me use a little pointer here. On the right, oops, the star here. On the right is Graphite, which was what we'll be focused on today, but we also offer a great digital citizenship program that I'll be talking about actually at 1 p.m. Pacific time in the next hour, the next session. And we have a program called One-to-One Essentials that helps schools plan and prepare for building a culture around a one-to-one rollout at their school. We offer professional development, as we're doing right now, and then a family education program that helps support our larger education programs to ultimately help students have the skills, knowledge to learn, communicate, and collaborate and thrive in the 21st century. Okay, so we recently did a survey of more than 900 K-12 teachers and administrators that found that 96% of them believe technology has a positive effect on student engagement, but 43% said that they have a lack of training for teachers on how to use and implement technology. So that's a challenge. And just one second, I just want to make sure here. Okay, sorry about that. I just had to pause and make sure that I had the right deck in here. That would be a bummer if it was the wrong version. And then another challenge is that there's so much out there in the marketplace for teachers that it's really a challenge to find and to use good ed tech for learning. And by ed tech, that's really a broad term. We specifically are referring to apps, websites, and games and the content, but it's also the devices. You know, how do you choose the right device and the right content for students? So, you know, some teachers, the innovators may like and find it enjoyable to spend hours and hours, and they may be good at it, at finding great content and using it. But for the average teacher, it's very frustrating, and it's time consuming, and it's time that they don't have. So, let me go back here. Here's a couple of quotes from teachers, and it was actually from a recent report by the Gates Foundation on what teachers think about instructional technology that just came out, I think it was yesterday. But one teacher says, you know, much of what is currently out there is simplistic and doesn't promote critical thinking skills. I'm willing to integrate more technology, but I need help finding high quality resources and sifting through the junk out there. And then another teacher says, talks about student learning is the goal, that we should really remember that student learning is the goal and must remain the goal. We put a man on the moon without slides and calculators, so it's hard to argue that technology is essential for learning. It must enhance the experience in order for it to be implemented in my class. I do not do technology for the sake of technology. Every resource is available to me, but frankly, a lot of technology is more of a gee whiz and fails to meet the criteria of enhancing student learning. And that's what I want to get at today is helping you think about technology integration and how it connects to your lessons with pedagogical insight. And so Graphite helps you discover and use and share great tools for learning, for specifically apps, websites, and games. So it also helps you apply these key skills for today's teachers, and that's the discovery of great content that supports your students. And nowadays it's primarily technology content, either via the web or in apps and so forth. Teachers need to be able to evaluate the learning potential of digital tools and determine whether or not they're good for students' learning. They need to be able to curate by organizing their content in convenient and useful ways. There's so much content out there, and there's a lot of different curation tools that help teachers keep track and organize what they're using and create learning playlists for students and so forth. So curation is a key, really important skill. And innovate by weaving in new technology into the curriculum using pedagogical frameworks and engaging students and improving learning outcomes. So that's what we'll be focused on today, is kind of the innovation piece and weaving it into your lessons, and then collaborating with other educators to share best practices. And if you want to multitask, which I encourage you to do, I'm going to have you visit graphite.org is what I'm talking about today, and you can sign up for free. Everything is free. You can join the community for free and start, sharing best practices around EdTech integration. And here's, I'm going to be showing you a lot of screenshots today because the web tour involves a lot of clicking, and I don't think it quite shows you around the page the way I want it to. So I encourage you to either multitask or check it out after this session. It's graphite.org, and I'll show you some screenshots. So Graphite helps teachers discover, share, and use high-quality content for the classroom through rigorous ratings and reviews. The tools are rated for learning potential. Every product is aligned to Common Core. There's a teacher community where teachers share insights and their own reviews of what they think of these tools and how they're using them. So it's a great way, it's a great tool for your toolkit, if you will, on how you're finding and using technology and weaving it into your curriculum. So we realized that there was no central marketplace where we have ratings and reviews. It's kind of all over the place. I mean, there's a lot of different resources out there that, like Edutopia and eSchool News may have top 10 lists, top 10 apps for this or best apps for that, but there was no central system for reliable content comparison that included a teacher community where teachers can share their best practices. And we wanted to make it easy to use and convenient for teachers. And of course, free is always helpful too. And so one of the things you can do on Graphite is discover great content for learning. And I'm showing you screenshots, but what you can do is filter down by the type of tool you're looking for. Is it an app? Is it a website? Is it a game? By the subject area that you teach or that you're looking for. By grade level, and then also by price. So, I mean, for a lot of people, free is great, and you're looking for free things, so you can filter down that way. And that what will happen is tools will be served up that meet those criteria in the filters. And you can also filter down by Common Core standards. So if you're outside the U.S., so if you're, Maru, if you're in India, this probably isn't going to apply, but it's very big here in the States for the Common Core states. And so you could actually start with the topic area, so maybe language arts, then the grade level, 6th grade, and then the main standards. So in language arts, there's language, there's reading for information, reading literature, speaking, listening skills, and writing skills. And you could even drill down to the specific standard itself. So, for instance, reading for information in 6th grade, and the standard is determining the meaning of words and phrases as they're used in a text, including figurative, connotative, and technical meanings. And what will happen is the products that meet that standard will all be served up for you, and you can drill down deeper and look into the specific review of that product. So, for instance, this is Subtext, which is a wonderful tool for collaborative reading and for meeting Common Core standards. And it'll tell you the grade level right here. So for grades 4 to 12, there's these different ratings here, which I'll explain in a minute. All of the other standards supported, sort of the pros, cons, and the bottom line about the tool, and then the 3 learning dimensions that we look at. So just a little bit of background about our ratings. The learning rating here is by one of our expert reviewers on Graphite. These are, teachers that have a lot of experience with technology. They're great writers, and they do a very in-depth review. That's once you click beyond this page, you'll get a much more in-depth review. But then any teacher can go on and submit his or her own rating in what we call a field note. And that's what you'll see is their crowdsourced teacher rating, so you could get a sense of what do teachers using this tool think of it. Then we also look at engagement, pedagogy, and support for each tool. So I'll expand on that in a little bit. And then when you go to the main review, you'll see much more. So this is the main review page, and there's just much more information for you to take a deep dive into the product. So I mentioned some of these things before. This is what I wanted to show you, is the in-depth, rigorous review, and it gives you a lot of information about it. There's also additional skills that are listed and other general information that might be helpful for you. So I talked about the dimensions, the 3 dimensions, and this is something to think about as you're evaluating technology to integrate into your curriculum. So you should be looking at these 3 dimensions, and one is engagement, and I think we often think of engagement, like, is the tool engaging for learners? Do they want to come back for more? Do they want to keep returning to it? Is it fun to use? Are they into it? So that's engagement. Pedagogy is really about, the learning. Are they learning what the tool is set out to do? Is it a deep and lasting learning? Does the learning transfer beyond, the experience within the product itself? Like, they can apply it to different situations. And then support looks at what kind of support is offered for teachers and students, such as, tutorials or a teacher dashboard, teacher reporting, those kinds of things. So we look at those 3 dimensions, and I encourage you to consider, in the tools that you're using, consider how those dimensions are in play. I'm sure you've all experienced something that you've used that hasn't been that great, and it probably had a downside in one of these particular areas. We also have top picks lists. That's another way to discover great content. And I mentioned field notes. You can add your own review in the form of a field note, and you can see what other teachers think in their field notes. So these are the teacher ratings, and it's a review, but it's not as much of an in-depth review as the main reviews. I mentioned curation, so you can put together what we call boards. If you're familiar with Pinterest, it's kind of like Pinterest. And right now it's just any content that's on Graphite, but we will be opening it up to be any content at all. And we know how important it is to create collections that are useful of you, of tools and resources that are sort of your go-to resources, whether it's just overall for you as a teacher, whether it's specific to your students or your class, or even down to the specific lesson, which is more of the app flow concept. This is an example of my board on digital storytelling, for instance, just a collection of tools that are great for storytelling. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So, you've done, you could use all those resources on Graphite to find the technology, but the goal is to marry the good stuff, the good tools that you find into an app flow. And for us, it's a way to reframe your traditional lesson plan as a customizable framework which redefines that lesson plan to integrate digital tools with pedagogical insight. So let me kind of dive into the concept here. We want to scaffold the tried and true lesson design from the hook in the beginning to the wrap up at the end, and I'll dive into this, that all teachers are familiar with, into seamlessly integrating technology into those particular steps of a lesson or even a unit. I think, oftentimes we get tool-centric, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and we forget about this lesson design, that really when you're teaching something, you have to move students through this experience. But AppFlow offers you a framework where you can weave in these tools into the lesson design. And it's a way to sort of tech up your lesson design. So this is just a screenshot of the AppFlow page, and what you'll see is actually other people that have written, other teachers that have written AppFlows, and you can get ideas on how to tech up your own teaching, or you could even, use some of these lessons as they stand, and think about how they've woven in technology and whether it's the technology you want to use or get ideas that way. So you may be familiar with Madeline Hunter's lesson design. And this is sort of a condensation of that framework. So these are sort of the steps that a teacher would move through to get their students through any sort of you know, piece of content or something that they want them to learn. So the hook, which can also be called a variety of things like the anticipatory set. There's a variety of names for it, but really you're hooking students' interest. You're connecting with their prior learning, right? You are stating the learning objectives clearly, and you're getting them engaged, right? So that's the hook, of course. I'm just reviewing, and I know this, you probably all know this, but it's important to scaffold into AppFlow. Then direct instruction is where you are imparting the knowledge that you have that you want students to learn. And direct instruction does not have to be lecture, although in the traditional classroom it is. And I think the challenge is thinking of direct instruction as, you know, there's a variety of ways that you can impart knowledge. It can be, you know, a combination of you sharing, you know, a lecture, so to speak, with videos, with, you know, there's different apps that may impart knowledge to students. So that's the direct instruction piece. You're really sharing the information. Then guided practice is when students are working with the information. They're oftentimes working in groups and working collaboratively, and they're making sense and applying the information they learned. And as you move through this step, you can help them check for understanding and make sure that students are really understanding what you're wanting them to learn. Then independent practice is the step where students are showing mastery over the content, whether it's they're creating something that's demonstrating their clear understanding, or they're taking an assessment, those kinds of things. And the wrap-up is a closure to the lesson and sort of answering the so what question. Why is this important? How is this relevant? And then beyond that, you know, foreshadowing what's coming next, what you're going to be teaching next, and getting them prepared for the next step. So with this framework in mind, you know, this connects very well with the gradual release of responsibility framework, in which, you know, you're focusing the lesson, and you probably familiar with this too, but from the I do it to the we do it to the you do it together, and then you do it alone. So you're really helping get students from the point of where you are imparting the knowledge and, you know, you're working together in guided instruction to share it and collaborating in groups, and you're getting them to a point where they can independently explain and work with the knowledge alone, and that they have responsibility over their learning. So if you layer technology into these frameworks, it kind of gets overwhelming, right? Because it's like, okay, what do I put where? And there's so much to choose from, and how do I know what will work where? So I think oftentimes the downfall is that we tend to get what we call tool-centric and focus on the tool and put it on a pedestal, right? We focus on, you know, oh my gosh, this is a great tool. I'm going to use it with my students. Oh, I love, you know, I love BrainPop. We're just, you know, and you start with thinking about the tool itself. I love this app. I love this website. But we need to remember that just because it's a tool, and, you know, just because it's digital, we often, I like this quote from this teacher, we often fetishize technology, acting as if it improves learning simply by virtue of being technological. Find resources that are inherently valuable and not the same thing, but online now. So what this teacher is saying is, you know, we are putting technology on a pedestal. We often focus our efforts on the technology itself, and we need to move beyond that. And remember that we need to think about our goals. So backward design, or understanding by design, is a framework in which you start with the end in mind. And this is by Wiggins and Mackay, where you ask yourself, what enduring understandings do I want my students to develop in the beginning? And first, identify your learning outcomes. Then second, determine what evidence will be acceptable for for presenting those learning outcomes. And then last is when you plan the learning experience and instruction, and that includes the tools and the technology that you're going to use. So the problem is that we often start with the content, like the tool, and we get really excited about it, which is great, but it's not the right means for lesson design, right? To center an experience around the tool itself. So by planning the learning experiences first, like, okay, I'm going to have my students use subtext to do X, Y, Z, that's backward. That's the wrong way, because you really need to start with, as down here, your desired results and your goals, and determine the evidence that how you're going to get there first before you plan the learning experience. And that's really what we're trying to do with AppFlow, is help you keep those larger goals in mind, you know, and start with the big ideas and the skills. And I'll actually go back. Oh, here we go. Start with your identified results, which is the big ideas and the skills. It can include standards that you have to meet. It includes your goals for the unit. Then determine the acceptable evidence is, you know, what sort of assessment are you going to use? Is it traditional? Is it authentic? Is it formative or summative? You know, determine your assessment and your evidence, and what, you know, what the products are that students are going to be creating too, and then you figure out the technology and the tools. So that's the process, and it still works with technology. You just we have to try not to be tool-centric, right? So that's the goal with AppFlows, is you're weaving in ed tech into a lesson design that we're familiar with, that you know, it's tried and true, but we're also thinking about whether the technology we choose helps us achieve that particular step of the lesson. So let's look at it a different way. So this just indicates those 5 steps again. And the goal here is to think about, at each given point, is the technology, as you're thinking about tools that you could weave into your larger goals and into the activities, does the technology help me achieve this step? So for instance, in the hook, you know, does the technology, and actually let me move on to the next slide, does it grab students' interest and capture their attention? Does it help to do that? Does it make a connection with prior knowledge? Does it motivate students to want to learn more? And it's not necessarily just the technology, it's how you're having students use it. You know, what are they doing with it? But it warrants asking these kinds of questions for each section of your lesson, because at each different point of a lesson, you have different goals. And, you know, this will help you select the right tool to really help you achieve that step of the lesson. And not to mention, you don't necessarily have to use, ooh, sorry, there was just a really loud noise in this building. You don't really have to use technology at every single point of a lesson, but it helps you think about how you can flow from one side to the next, from one tool to the next. So in the AppFlow form, like here's an example down here. It's kind of hard to see, but we have options for you to include activities that don't involve technology at all. Because, you know, sometimes there are parts of a lesson where it just does not make sense to weave in technology, and that's totally fine. So, you know, you can choose to weave in here. Here's an explain everything in this step of the sample lesson. Here's another tool, vocabulary. But again, you know, there's the option in the AppFlow framework to not have to do that at all, to just do a non-tech lesson, and that's fine, as long as you're thinking about the goals of that part of the lesson. Okay, so I have a question, Annette. Was it a worksheet that the instructor? Yes. So AppFlows, and hopefully I can show you do a little web tour, and I'll just take you right to the page. But it's actually a form that you fill out, and what you can do is, let me show you right now, actually. That would be a good time. So I'm going to, okay, I'm going to take you to Graphite. All right, let me show you where this is, and show you some examples. It's looking a little bit wonky on here, a little bit squished right now. But when you're on Graphite, and you're logged in, if you go to the Teacher Center header, and this is a little bit slow, but hopefully it'll take me there. Okay, so what you should be seeing, and it should come up in a second, is the Teacher Center, and then there's another section called App Flows. So we're going to go into that section. All right, seems to be okay. Taking a little bit of time. All right, here we are. So what you're going to see in this section is a laundry list of app flows that other people have created. And just so you know, right now, Graphite is iterative. So right now it's just a list, but soon we'll have an organizational sense around this. So you will be able to filter by grade and by subject to find app flows that are relevant to you. But to a next question, you can design your own right by clicking Create an App Flow. And I'm not sure if you're seeing this because, okay, good. And you can kind of like in the lesson planning stage, you can either start by scratch and, okay, great. I'm glad you can see it. So start by scratch by literally planning a lesson, a new lesson. And remember, we're starting with our, so you would put the title, you put the objectives, and we're starting with the, the description. Then you would list your learning objectives, which is what we want to focus on, is starting with those. You can list different subjects and skills, and I'm kind of clicking through here right now, and I'm hoping that you can take a look as well. But if you scroll down, you'll see the different sections of the lesson from the hook in the beginning to the wrap up of the end. And you'll be able to select products that you've pre-selected for each point in your lesson. So maybe I want to use vocabulary, which I'm adding in here, and I'm not sure if you can see it. But okay, good. Vocabulary as a hook. You know, maybe and vocabulary is a great tool. It's like these really catchy kind of Schoolhouse Rock videos, but with a sort of rap component to it. They're great, and students love them. But maybe you find a great video that you can use as a hook. And what you would do is not only put the tool in there, and here are the reflection questions for you right under that tool, but you describe how this fits into your lesson, what you're having students do with it. I love Schoolhouse Rock too. And you can do that with each stage of the lesson. Now maybe in direct instruction, which is the next step, maybe I don't want to use a product. So if you look, you could select a product or just do an activity. Like maybe I am presenting, you know, a traditional lecture. And so what'll happen when you click that is you can just describe what you'll be presenting and how, right? So we don't have to integrate technology at every single point of the lesson. But that's why we offer you the two different options. So yes, this is the form. Now another thing you can do is take one of your existing lessons that you want to tech up and copy and paste it into this form and really look on Graphite to find those tools that will help you tech up each part of that step of your lesson, or at least maybe just one part of the lesson that you want to tech up, so to speak. And I'm scrolling down, and I'm not sure if you can see this, or you can scroll down as well. But at the very end, after you've filled out your lesson plan, you can publish. So at the very, very bottom, there is a option to publish this. But if you leave it unchecked, you can still save it and come back to it later and not have it published to the entire Graphite community. Or if you create a lesson that you don't want available to everybody, an app flow that you don't want available to everybody, you can just unclick unpublish and save it. So that's the framework that we offer you to use. And the nice thing is the tools will all be sort of embedded in there, and you can easily have connect with them or even have students connect with them. So that's an example of the framework. Now, let me go back to my slides here. I wanted to connect this, and I'm glad I have time, to SAMR. So let's do a little activity right now. Think about the last time that you used technology. Think about make a mental note or jot down a recent class activity in which students use technology. You had students use technology. And think about what was the task that students did and what was the tool that they used, right? And you can just jot this down or think about it. So an example would be a third grade teacher. My students wrote and recorded a screencast to show how they worked through a math problem regarding, counting dollars and cents. They're learning how to count money. So that the task was a math problem involving dollars and cents, and the tool was a screencast. And a screencast could mean like educreations or, gosh, I'm not thinking of all the other ones. But it's sort of a whiteboard tool where you can show yourself doodling and include images and audio and create a little video. Another example, 8th grade, my students wrote a persuasive essay about free speech versus censorship using Google Docs, where other students commented on their persuasive techniques in their essay. So the task is the persuasive essay about free speech. The tool is Google Docs. So you get the idea, right? So keep that in mind. Now, there is a role of SAMR in app flows. And if you're not familiar with SAMR, I will introduce it. And if you are, then great. It'll be a nice review. But the SAMR model is a way for teachers to evaluate how they're selecting and integrating technology into their instructional practice. So these are the different stages from substitution, that technology is just really substituting a task that you did without technology. An example of that would be flashcards, and you had flashcards that you had handwritten that students were using, and then you found this great flashcard app that was kind of engaging and catchy, but it's really just flashcards, right? It's the same thing. Augmentation has to do with some functional improvement that the tool offers. Modification is looking at a significant redesign of the task that students are doing. And then redefinition is the creation of entirely new tasks that were really inconceivable without technology. And this model, by the way, is becoming very, very popular in the EdTech community. So for instance, let me walk you through an example. Maybe students are writing an expository essay, right? A traditional writing assignment. So one example is, a sample of this would be, you have students write about rules. And, what are the most important rules at your school and describe why they're important. Or maybe you have them write about career day. And have them select a job that interests them and write a report about it. So you could have students do this by writing a Google Doc, by using a word processing program like Google Docs or Microsoft Office Word, and you can have them save it to Google Drive, right? But really, you're just substituting the writing assignment. So students may be writing by hand, literally, and now you're just having them write on a Word doc. Okay, so that's substitution. Augmentation example would be that you take features of that program, like features of Google Docs, for instance, and have them, use some of the functions within that, like they're highlighting, they're able to add hyperlinks, they're able to change the font and the style and the design. So there's some augmentation, but it's really more close to, technology is not really redefining the task in any way. Now, the next step would be modification. So modification means that you're starting to redefine the task. So say, for instance, they use Google Docs to write that expository essay, but they're collaborating now, and students are sharing comments and looking at each other's documents and maybe even collaboratively writing. And then maybe they take that essay that they wrote and create a book, an ebook. So Book Creator is a great app for iPad. Maybe they take that and they're creating a multimedia ebook based on their expository essay. Now, what they're doing is really creating something, and you're redefining the task. It's particularly through the Book Creator and modifying the task significantly that way. You're also modifying it significantly by having students collaborate with each other. And then finally, redefinition means that you're really, really redefining the task. So maybe they still write the expository essay collaboratively with collaborative feedback, and but then they record themselves explaining that through some sort of video format. You know, maybe it's a commercial, a quick commercial that they're doing for their particular essay, or maybe it's a really short and sweet snippet, a 2-minute video. And then they're doing all the editing and the shooting and adding music and all the multimedia elements. That is really redefining the task significantly. And that's an example of redefinition. You're transforming learning. And that is something that you couldn't do without the technology, right? The great thing about that, too, is that students are engaging in 21st century skills. So they're using multimedia, they're incorporating image and audio and bringing it all together to tell a story. So that's an example of SAMR and how to sort of tech it up from each level. So Puentedura talks about these questions and transitions to help you get from just simply substituting a task with technology to really transforming a task with technology. And he likens it to a ladder, that you can climb up a ladder and you're sort of climbing up the different steps. So for instance, if we took a lens on this, some of the questions, and they're in green, that he encourages us to ask, and this is just one of them, is with substitution, you need to ask yourself, what am I gaining by replacing the old technology with the new technology? I mentioned flashcards before. So does that mean that what are the flashcards that is a flashcard app really doing? Are you, is it just engaging students? I mean, I guess that's okay, but it's not really transforming the task in any way. And by all means, you don't have to aim to transform beyond substitution or augmentation all aspects of your lesson, right? Sometimes things are substituting, but it's good to reflect on what the purpose of the tool is in each step of your lesson. Then with augmentation, you're asking yourself, have I added an improvement to the task that could not be accomplished with the older technology at a fundamental level? So how am I improving the task in some way through the technology? Then moving up the ladder, you can ask yourself, if you're getting to modification, does the modification fundamentally depend on the new technology? So with the expository writing design example, Google Docs allows for collaboration where different people can comment on the document. That is fundamentally, that fundamentally depends on Google Docs. I mean, sure, students can, they can talk to each other verbally to share that feedback, which is another method, but maybe you're talking to students in other classrooms or students who are absent. So it does really depend on the function of Google Docs. And then finally, redefinition, to help you think about how to get there, ask yourself, how is the new task uniquely made possible by the new technology? So for instance, in the example that I gave, if students are creating a movie, that movie and using iMovie or whatever sort of movie creation tool you want to use is uniquely made possible by the technology. It's something that they really have to have the technology to be able to do, and you've redefined the task completely into a movie-making task. So think back to that example that I had you consider earlier, and think about where it fits in the SAMR model. And you can just think about this. You know, you can chat it out if you want in the chat box. But what you want to do is think about ways that you can maybe tech it up, if it makes sense, and get to the next step of the ladder. So if you're thinking of something and you're like, oh, I really think this is maybe augmentation, but, you know, think about how can you get to these higher steps of transformation, which, by the way, really connect with higher order thinking skills up here. You know, the creating and the analyzing and the evaluating, they're all up here in the top section. That's where you want to get ideally, with technology integration. So I guess I could go through this really quickly. So here's another example of reading. Students are reading, but you're substituting by having them read an ebook instead of a paperback book. Okay, so ebooks have, it depends on the ebook, but you know, if it's just sort of a reprint with some not many additional features, then they're just reading on their tablet or reading online. But ask yourself, how can you tech this up? So maybe you could use augmentation you could still have students read the ebook, and this is for iBooks icon, but maybe you have them use Evernote or tools within the iBooks to help them highlight or keep track of notes, to help them search and copy and paste. Those are examples of augmenting the task, right? So they have those are some things that, you know, functions that that the tool helps students use, but it's still staying true to the original task of reading the passage, close reading. But you could modify it by having students use subtext for reading. And what subtext is an example of a collaborative reading tool. So rather than students just, let me go back here, reading individually and writing their notes and, you know, saving them in Evernote and so forth and using the highlighting functions, you're now using a collaborative reading tool where students are commenting on each other's thoughts of the passages, and you can include little quizzes, and it's a very collaborative experience. Maybe you want to do more by redefinition. So maybe you have students use read that same passage in subtext collaboratively with the collaborative functions, but then you have them take a piece of it and use VoiceThread, which is a tool that allows students to share their comments on text and media and share their audio comments that way. So maybe you have students take a passage of the text, put it in VoiceThread, and really have them share their thoughts using a voice recording function and sort of a video function. So that's an example of redefining the task altogether. That you're taking that reading task and you're creating, you're having students create something multimedia that they can share out, that they can collaborate on. So I'm hoping this is all making sense. And why I'm bringing it up is because I really think there's wonderful connections between AppFlow and SAMR. So the SAMR model helps us, thanks Annette, that's helpful feedback. The SAMR model helps us think about how we're redefining the task, and you can use that as a lens as you're using AppFlows as well. So there's sort of two dimensions of this. AppFlows help you think about at what point in the lesson are you integrating technology, and is the technology that you're selecting helping you achieve that step of the lesson from the hook? Is it helping you achieve direct instruction, guided practice, and so on? Add SAMR as a lens on that, and now you're thinking about, okay, well, you know, am I just simply substituting the same task that maybe could be done without technology, or is it something that I could really, really redefine and have students do something, totally redefine the task with technology and create something? And oftentimes redefinition, just from what I've seen, includes some sort of media creation activity and a collaboration activity. So just something to think about as you're using AppFlow and as you're really teching up lessons. So I encourage you to even just take one lesson that you want to tech up, so to speak, and start an AppFlow and use these frameworks to help you think through it, and use Graphite to help you find the great tools that you could integrate, and read the field notes from teachers to see how they're using these different tools, and look through the AppFlows and see how other teachers are thinking about it. But we're hoping that it's a helpful way for you to reframe your lesson design to integrate technology. Just one more, if you join late or anything, this is the website, graphite.org by Common Sense Media, and it's all free for you. If you join, you'll be able to create and save app flows and boards and field notes and all those things that I introduced to you earlier. We also have a certification program if you're interested and you just are interested in learning more or doing more. And I can put the URL in there. Hold on. Okay, hopefully that works. But it's a way for you, if you really want to do more with Graphite, it's a way for you to, like if you're creating an app flow and you're doing field notes, why not get certified for the stuff that you're doing on Graphite? And there are incentives for you to go through the certification process that we offer. This is a list of our final education programs. Just if you weren't with us in the beginning, but we offer a whole host of a variety of digital citizenship tools and one-to-one planning tools, family education and professional development. So you can check those out. And then if you want to contact me directly, feel free. Here are my Twitter handle, and then Common Sense and Graphite's Twitter handle. But I'd be happy to answer your questions. So I hope that app flows is helpful. I encourage you to start one today and enjoy the rest of Learning Revolution. Thank you very much for joining.